Hope everybody had a good spring break as we're back finishing up Unit 2. So we find ourselves in Lesson 18, Poles and Margin of Error, on page 159. Now there's a paragraph on page 159 above this table here that you see. And so what I would like you to do first, before we get into anything, I want you to hit pause. I want you to read that paragraph above and answer questions 1 and 2 underneath this poll in the table that it created. Okay, so hit pause, read that, answer questions 1 and 2, and then come back. All right, hopefully you read that paragraph, you looked at the poll. And now looking at these questions. So number 1, where did this poll come from? Well, you can either get it in the paragraph above, or when you look at this, you can see that it says the source, Pew Internet and Life Spring Tracking Survey. So this really came from Pew Research Center, but it was that survey, the tracking survey from the Pew Research Center, of where this poll came from. And what is the population represented by this poll? There's a key word there, and that is population. So population is the overall group that is being represented by your survey or your poll or whatever it is you're looking at. So in this case, again, if you look down here, it says cell phone owners age 18 plus. So who are we looking at? We are looking at cell phone owners 18 plus. So we don't care about the 12-year-olds who have cell phones. We're only talking about the adults. So 18 and over of the Americans who have cell phones. So that is the population there. Okay, now I want you to turn the page to 150 and hit pause again, and I want you to try to go ahead and answer these questions as best as you can, and then come back and we'll talk about them. All right, looking at page 160, number 3. Not every adult American was asked, right? We only talked about part of them. So when we talked about the population is everybody that you possibly could talk to. But if we only talk to some of them, we call that a sample. So a sample is part of the population. So when you go back, I know I'm flipping back and forth, I apologize, but when we go back to this very first page, you see N equals 2076. That tells you your sample size. So when you see the letter N means sample size. So our sample size is 2076. So we only talked to 2076 American adults who were 18 and older. All right, so now we get into some math part, and you know how I love math. Number 4, how many people out of 2076 polled said they used their cell phone for internet access? Let me jump back again and go back to this. Well, we're talking about May of 13, so we're talking about this area, and here it is, 63%, right? That's the total cell internet use. So when I go back to do this, I know that 63% of 2076. Well, what does of mean? Of means multiply, correct. So 63% multiplied by 2076, and that comes out to be a nice answer of 1307. So 1,307 of them would use their cell phone for internet access. Now I know you get 1,307.88 because we're talking about people, right? You can't have a part of a person. So we round to the round down, because if we have 0.88 of a person, it doesn't make a full person. If you rounded up, I wouldn't hate you, but mathematically you should round down. All right, number 5. Estimate the number of Americans who own a cell phone. Well, okay. Back to this again. I lied. It's in the paragraph at the top that says 91% of Americans own a cell phone. Okay, so again, of is multiply. So 91% of, how many Americans are there? Do you remember from way back when? The number that I can remember in my head is 314 million. So when I do that, I get 285,740,000. That's how many Americans own a cell phone. Okay, an estimate. An estimate. And we're going to need that then for number 6, because in number 6 it says, explain how the authors can conclude 57% of all American adults are cell internet users. Well, if we know, or if we estimate, I should say, 285,740 own a cell phone, then based on that poll, we know that 63% of them, right, use cell internet access. So, when we multiply those together, I get 180,016,200. So that is based off of, these are cell phone owners, and then we get this number from the poll. Okay, so 63% of cell phone owners 18 and older would use it. Now, it says, explain how the authors can conclude 57% of all Americans. Well, when you say all, right, 57% of all Americans. Well, if we take 57% and multiply by all of the Americans, you end up with an answer of 178,980,000. I don't know about you guys, but when I look at these two numbers, this number here that I just circled in purple and this number, I mean, we're off by about 1 million. And when you're talking about numbers this big, that's pretty close. So I guess this is my interpretation of this question, but this is why I believe you can say 57% of all adult Americans are cell internet users based off of this information. So it kind of works, looking at it two different ways. Number 7. 7 and 8 really kind of go together. So number 7, let's suppose another group of 2,076 American adults were asked the question, do you use your cell phone to go online? Would the percent who said yes always be the same? In other words, would you always get 63%? And we could have a big, long conversation about this, but I think most of us would say, would you get 63% exactly? Probably not. Excuse me, probably not exactly. But I would say it may be close. Right? I would say it's not going to be exactly 63%, but it might be 65, it might be 62, it might be 61.25, right? So it's probably going to be around that, but it's really hard to land exactly on the same thing. Now, in number 8 says, let's say you talk to every adult American, 18 and older, and you ask them that question, would you get 63%? So in number 7, we're talking about just a sample, 2,076, and in number 8, we're talking about all of them. Well, would we get 63%? And I'm going to say, my answer is going to be exactly the same. You're probably not going to get exactly 63%, but you're probably going to be close, right? Polls give us an estimate, and it's usually pretty close to what we have. And then number 9, why are polls taken? We could have 400 answers for this, I'm sure. Polls, they give us information. They show a change over time. So, with presidential polls, who's leading, that kind of thing. So really, there's a lot of different answers that you could have there for number 9. All right, let's go on to page 161. All right, here on page 161, we get into the concept of margin of error. So I just mentioned that you're close, right? We're going to talk to more people, and we're going to get something close to 63%. So if you're like, give or take, right, there's your margin of error. So I'm going to flip back, apologize. When you look at this lovely thing again, at the bottom here, it says margin of error is plus or minus 2.4 percentage points. So when we go back to the page that we're on, the margin of error is 2.4%. Right? So that means we could be anywhere between, well, if 63 is in the middle, if we subtract 2.4, that gets us 60.6 on this side. And if you would add 2.4, we would get 65.4%. So when you would ask people, we would estimate that anywhere between 60.6% and 65.4%, that's what we would expect given the margin of error based off of our estimate, our point estimate, which in this case is 63%. Now, to go just a little bit further, I want you to notice that we have 95%. This is our level of certainty. Sometimes we call this a confidence level. Here in this class, we are going to deal with 95% only, and that is, it's a very common one. If you ever take a statistics class, you will deal with confidence levels of all shapes and sizes, 95, 90%, 88%, 98%, 99%, whatever. But for our case, we're dealing with the most common, and the most common is 95%. So we can then lead into confidence intervals. So a confidence interval allows us to, and actually I've already showed you that in the last slide, but the confidence interval says, okay, I'm going to take my point estimate, and in this case our point estimate is 63%. That was our estimate when we surveyed a set number of people. So you take your point estimate, and this they call it the sample percent, and then you add and subtract your margin of error to find your range, right? The range of people that you want to deal with here. So if I would take my 63% and add and subtract my 2.4, as I did in the last slide, our confidence interval is 60.6% to 65.4%. And if you see right underneath this, it says this means we are 95% confident that the true proportion of all American adult cell phone internet users is between 60.6% and 65.4%. Okay, so we can write sentences, and I would write a sentence that looks a little bit like this for this problem. So my sentences always look pretty much the same. They always start with, we are 95% confident that, and then I put in my my confidence interval. I'm 95% confident between 60.6% and 65.4% of, and then this is whatever I'm talking about. So in this particular sentence, problem, we're talking about American adults that are cell internet users. So I kind of have a set sentence that it's like Mad Libs. It always starts with, we are 95% confident that, between, put in your confidence interval, of, talk about whatever it is you're talking about. And that kind of gives you a nice sentiment of how to set up your sentences every time. And it gets the point across, right? You know exactly what you're talking about. All right, well, how do we find this margin of error? Because there's our next piece. So to find the margin of error, we can use a really big honking formula, but we're not going to, because we're going with the basic 95%. So when you have a 95% confidence interval, which is what we are dealing with, we will find our margin of error by taking 1 divided by the square root of n. So the error, which is E, is 1 over the square root of n. So let's remember, E represents the error, margin of error, and n is the sample size. So we always have to have our sample size in order to find our margin of error. So at the bottom of page 161, we're going to do number 12 together. Whoop. Number 12, it tells us the sample size is 1095. So if I want to find my error is 1 divided by the square root of 1095. Now, depending on your calculator, your calculators, some of them you have to type in the number and then hit the square root sign. Some of them you can type in just exactly the way you see this problem. It'll come out nicely. So when we do this problem and get the answer, I want to make sure that you play with your calculator until you understand how it works. Okay, so one way to do it is to go ahead and find the square root of 1095 first, and that would give me 1 over 33.09078, and it goes on and on and on and on and on. Then I would take 1 and I would divide it by that answer, and I would get, oh my gosh, I can't hit the right button. There, finally hit the right button. 1 divided by that, and I get 0.0302. And of course, we'll talk about rounding. If we're talking about decimals, that's a great answer. If we want it to be a percent, remember we'd move it 2 places. And this would be like a 3% margin of error for this particular problem. All right, so I want you to hit pause and I want you to play with this until you get that in your calculator. And then actually, while you're paused, go ahead and go on to number 13. All right, so number 13, we've got a sample size of 2,000. So now I have 1 over the square root of 2,000, which gives me 0.022, and as a percent, that is 2.2%, or 2%, depending on what they ask you to round to. So hopefully you now understand how to calculate the margin of error.